horizontal stabilizers.
Check.
Ion thrusters.
Looks like we got a tailwind. If we time it right, we can ride the slipstream of the grav train past the sea-grid traffic. Launch the mag grappler onto that pedway overpass and slingshot right up to...
Ratchet.
The thrusters are fine, Clank. See?
Over the course of 5 games, the Ratchet & Clank franchise has crafted its own identity and a large following as well. But the duo's first outing on the PlayStation 3 finds them facing an identity crisis of sorts. While the issue of there being so many different gameplay mechanics is one of the main things that prevents the game from achieving the same high level as previous entries in the series, it's still a very fun game. It's impossible to ignore the game's great graphics, so we'll start there. Tools of Destruction is probably one of the most vibrant and colorful games you've ever seen. Part of this is due to the lighting, which makes everything look more dynamic, but there are lots of pastel colors and what appear to be hand-drawn backgrounds that make the game look like a cross between a cartoon and a Pixar movie.
Where are you going?
It's a shortcut. Trust me.
With all the camera pans, particle effects, explosions, and dozens of characters on screen at once, it's almost like the developer was taunting the frame rate, daring it to slow down. Other than a few brief instances, it never does. A good story would have been nice, but this sort of game is really all about the gameplay, so it doesn't hurt too much that one of Tools of Destruction's weakest aspects is its story. The voice acting is solid, and the dialogue is quite funny, but the story is barely fleshed out enough to give you reason to go from one level to the next.
Heavily armed robotic commandos, but I figured, hey, if you were in the neighborhood, maybe...
It's not helped by a lousy cliffhanger ending that does everything but plaster "find out about the exciting conclusion in the sequel" across the screen. Thankfully, there's some really good gameplay to make up for it. Like the previous games, the action is viewed from a third-person perspective and is primarily a mix of platforming and shooting, with an emphasis on the shooting. One of the game's best aspects is the controls. You'll be jumping around, blowing bad guys away in a matter of seconds. As always, Ratchet has a large arsenal available to him. There are grenades, rockets, spikes, blasters, a whip, bouncing saw blades, and a whole lot more. He also has a lot of gadgets at his disposal. Ratchet can release a swarm of nano bees that will attack anything that gets near, toss up a disco ball and blast enemies as they dance, turn foes into penguins, and even break out a holographic pirate outfit for those occasions when he just needs to be all piratey. While the game does a good job of encouraging you to use different weapons and items, you'll find that there are a handful that work extremely well, so it's possible to get into a rut of using the same attack patterns over and over because they're so effective. There's a lot more to Tools of Destruction than platform jumping and shooting, perhaps too much. There's so many different gameplay mechanics that you get the sense that the developer didn't say no to any idea that was presented during the design process. Dude, you should totally put Ratchet in a ball like in Super Monkey Ball. I was thinking he could dress as a pirate and do a short dancing minigame to open doors. Consider it done, and while we're at it, we'll have him fly a spaceship, swim, and grind rails too. The game uses motion controls to mix results. You'll fly around levels, tilting the controller to steer, and even hack security systems with motion controls by rolling a ball around and conducting electricity. These minigames aren't bad, and they actually control pretty well, but they're just not as fun as running around shooting guys. Oh yeah, there are a few times where Clank goes solo. These situations are more puzzle and platforming oriented than Ratchet's, and you'll have to use the zony alien dudes that only Clank can see to help repair items and manipulate bridges. They say variety is the spice of life, but there's such a thing as too much spice. The fact is, while some of these things break up the flow of the game, the core gameplay is so solid, you'll still have lots of fun on this 10 to 12 hour adventure. Combat is quite satisfying, and while there's generally one linear path to a level's main objective, there's plenty of opportunity for exploring if you're trying to find the game's many collectible items. The collecting doesn't slow the game down much though, and thanks to clearly laid out paths and a helpful map, you're rarely at a loss as to what to do next. You won't have to worry much about dying slowing you down, because the game is extremely easy and only gets remotely difficult in the last hour or so. The difficulty will be fine for kids, but anyone who's played a Ratchet game before will likely find this adventure too easy. To throw everything in, including the kitchen sink style gameplay that takes too much of the focus off platforming and combat, as well as a lack of challenge, keeps Tools of Destruction from achieving the same level of greatness as its predecessors. But it's a very good and good-looking action-adventure game on a system in need of just that.